Good morning, guys. Welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade Union Flag Custom 2, otherwise known as the GN Flag, which is what I'm going to be calling it for the rest of the video. So this is a 2025 Premium Bandai exclusive release that I got for about $27, which does seem a little bit much for a custom grunt suit like this, but I think there might be a bit of a reason for that, because this is a 2025 release which is apparently all brand new molding. This reuses none of the parts of the original high-grade 00 Flag kits from like 15 to 18 years ago at this point, which is a good thing because the high-grade 00 line is quite aged at this point. So I'm excited to see how all of the new higher quality molding and tech that Bandai has integrated into this design actually builds up and plays out. And this is fairly exciting because it might indicate a line of high-grade 00 Revive kits, which, if it's a thing, I expect will come out in 2027 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Gundam 00. But getting right into it, of course, for the box art here, this is a very typical kind of premium Bandai style box, which is in a monochrome black, which is the main color of the GN Flag. And this is, of course, showing off an edited version of one of the promo images with the GN Flag here, kind of miming about to dual wield the beam saber here, connected with a cable. And then, of course, the beam saber effect part there has been edited to look more dynamic. Of course, being a premium Bandai style box, there is pretty much no information on the sides of the box. So let's get right into it. Inside the box, we will get 3 bags of runners, which does seem about right for a customized grunt suit like the GN Flag is. Of course, you'll be getting a pretty normal premium Bandai style manual here, no art, no info spread or anything like that, entirely in black and white. You will, of course, be getting your parts list here, which again does seem about right for a custom grunt suit like this. And then, of course, getting right into the build, starting with the torso. So yeah, this does look like it is actually going to be fairly involved. You see plenty of layering all across this kit, which should mean that this kit is going to be fairly color accurate and have a nice range of articulation here. And it also looks like, because of the flag's design, you are also going to be building the waist here alongside the torso, because the two are kind of integrated together into one unit. The waist does look like it's going to be fairly simple just because that's how the flag is going to be designed. And it looks like the torso is going to have a locking mechanism when it's inserted into the waist. And then, of course, you build up the GN drive Tau that will mount into the GN Flag's back here. I think you can relocate it into the shoulder for posing, but we will see later on the manual. Of course, you get into the head here, fairly simple, fairly typical for a high grade. Then you move on to your arms here, which also do look quite simple, but I assume you're all going to be building up these shoulders later. And then you build up your hands. It does look like you're only going to be getting an open expressive hand for the right side, which is a little bit odd. Normally it's only for the left side. And then, of course, you build up the left arm here. Talking about matching forms and combining them, not exactly sure what this is about, presumably for like shoulder armor and attaching that onto the kit. This fairly simple step at the end of each of the arms is going to be the shoulder armor, which you of course attach first before you mount the arms. Then you get into your legs, which look a little bit more involved than the arms, but still fairly simple. Again, this is still a customized grunt suit. Then you build up the individual legs with these, I think, like stabilizer things on the sides of them. And then, of course, you get into your weapons. You have your linear rifle for your ranged option here, which does look like it's going to be very simple. And then, of course, you have the GN beam saber here, which you attach with a wire to the shoulder here. You will, of course, be using the clear red part here with the standard GN beam saber. And then you have the blue beam saber effect part for the plasma sword, which does not attach with any kind of wire. And then, of course, you can't relocate the GN drive Tau to the shoulder to show that when the wire is connected to it, it's getting extra power directly from the GN drive instead of kind of routed through the body. And of course, talking about being able to mount it onto an Action Base 7. And then, of course, you get your color guide down here, text only in black and white. So they don't show it off in the manual, but I had heard that the transformation mechanism for the flag, while in lore it's not supposed to be present, it was supposed to be removed in the GN Flag to accommodate the GN drive Tau. Apparently, it is still present in the model, and you can't transform it. So we'll see if I could find any kind of instructions online on how to do that. And if I can, I will show it off in this video. But getting into the contents of the bags. So inside the bags, you'll be getting 10 runners, which does seem about right for, again, a simplified, customized grunt suit like this. In addition, you will be getting this color correcting sticker sheet, which does seem fairly small, fairly understandable. You'll of course be getting 2 parts in orange with a thin metallic orange strip in the middle of them for the face. And then you will of course be getting these 2 white accent parts. Not exactly sure where these go. We will see after the build. And of course, in addition to that, you will be getting this blue wire here for use with the GN beam saber to connect into either the shoulder or directly into the GN drive Tau when it is mounted on the shoulder. So yeah, that should really help enhance certain melee poses and convey the amount of power being driven into the GN beam beam saber. As for the runners themselves, so these runners were printed in September of 2025, starting with runners A1 and A2, with this middle part shared between them, for a number of parts in the signature black of the GN flag. This is going to contain parts for, of course, your linear rifle here. Some of the duplicated parts include parts for your legs. You get duplicate parts for the plasma cutter here. You get parts for the torso over here. You get parts for, I believe, the head, etc. Runners B1 and B2, still in that same black color, going to be the majority of the frame and joint parts seen throughout this kit. You see parts for the waist, parts for the knee joints, you see your open expressive hand here, you see parts for the torso, you see a part here either for the waist or the collar or something like that, not exactly sure. You will get, okay, so I think this is going to be your GN Saber, and the other two things you saw earlier were the plasma cutters. You will, of course, get a core unit for, I think, the GN Drive Tau, etc. Runners C1 and C2 in white, with this bottom part shared between them, going to contain a number of accent parts for throughout the kit, because, well, if the entire thing were just in black, it would be kind of a boring design to look at, so they did have some accents here in white for some contrast. You see some of the border parts for, like, some of the wing details and things like that that aren't going to be used in the transformation, but just help with aerodynamics and maneuverability in the air in just its mobile suit form. And, of course, you have a part here for the GN Drive Tau, as well as some other accent parts. Runner D1 containing 3 parts in this injection silver here, going to contain some accent parts, I believe 1 part for the head, a part for maybe the GN Drive Tau, not exactly sure, and then a third accent part slash joint over here. Runner D2 in orange is going to contain 2 parts presumably for the face, but we will see once the build is done. And then you will get 2 of runner SB9 here for a set of standard kind of flat style beam saber effect parts. Again, very standard for the 00 kits. They'll use flat style beam saber effect parts with a rectangular peg. You will, of course, get 2 in blue for use with the plasma cutters, and 2 in red. You will only be using 1 for the GN beam saber. So yeah, it looks like it is going to be a fairly simple build, but I'm still interested to see how pleasant it is, because this is making use of 18 years of development in Bandai's tech for creating model kits, compared to when the original flag kits came out when 00 released back in like 2007. So yeah, very interested to see how this kit builds up, and I'll see you after that build. Alright, welcome back. Here is the high-grade 00 GN Flag, snap-built, panel-lined, and lightly painted. And before I get into the build, I just want to clarify something real quick. The runner labels I was a little bit misinformed on. Apparently they are all just labeled high-grade Union Flag, so yeah, that really does kind of lend some hope that we are going to be getting a line of like revived flags or some new flags that haven't gotten model kits yet or anything like that. And this kit also includes the linear rifle, which I don't think was used by the GN Flag in the show, so that also lends some credence that we are going to be getting some new kind of flag at some point in the future. But getting right into the build, this is still a customized grunt suit at the end of the day, so the build is going to be rather simple, but it is still very pleasant, making use of a lot of the quality of life improvements that Bandai have made to their model kit builds in the like 18 or so years since the original high-grade 00 flag kits came out. So the vast majority of this kit does use some kind of rotation lock mechanism, where many of the pegs in this kit have a little tab on the end. You insert it into the slot backwards and then rotate it 180 degrees to kind of lock it in place and stop it from falling out. So despite how kind of thin and fragile this kit's proportions look, the vast majority of parts in here are relatively solidly in place and help this kit feel a lot more robust and a lot more durable than it otherwise would. But that isn't to say that this kit's build is infallible. There are some slight fit issues in a couple of parts, particularly in the head going into the ball joint for the neck. That part did feel a little bit tight, it felt a little bit awkward, and the head does feel very shallow on it, so I don't know if I did something wrong in constructing the torso, where the neck assembly is supposed to be a little bit further up than mine ended up being. But regardless, the head is rather shallow on the peg, which does limit its articulation and lead it to fall off a little bit more easily than I would like. In addition, assembling the head, the part with the face plate, there is an articulation gimmick where the faceplate can open up to replicate the gimmick from the show, which is cool, but in assembling the head, it is a rather tight squeeze, so in assembling the head, it does tend to kind of wedge the face mask off, and it is kind of a pain to have to put it back in place and try again to refit everything back to where it should be. So that's a little bit annoying, but kind of the most pressing annoyance in terms of actually building this kit is going to be in the top of the torso for the 2 kind of like stabilizer things that go on the top of the torso. As you probably saw in the time-lapse footage, one of them did end up snapping. It is a very tight fit, and if you don't align it just right, it is not going to go in. I did not realize that, so I pushed a little bit too hard, and that that part snapped. I plastic cemented it back together, and it does seem to be holding fine, but it is something you should keep in mind when building this kit, that that part is going to be a little bit fragile. But apart from that, this build is fairly nice. No polycaps to be seen, so it is a fairly solid build. In conjunction with all of the rotation locks I mentioned earlier, this kit does put together very nicely. You can finish it rather quickly, but it is still a fairly pleasant build as long as you pay attention to those slight fit issues in the head and in the tops of the torso. So apart from that, the build is quite pleasant. So coming back to it in the booth, getting to aesthetics now, one part I did forget to mention was I did shave off the safety flags in the top of the head and in the backs of the spikes in the collar. This flap right here is the thing I was mentioning when I was saying that like a part snapped and I had to plastic cement it back together, but there are some fairly gross looking safety flags that are on the backs of these like pointy details out of the box, so I do recommend you shave them off to help the kit just look a little bit more sharp and help the aesthetic come together a little bit more, because the flag is a very angular kit and those safety flags do kind of take away from that a little bit. But getting into color correcting stickers, any details I painted in before getting into my opinions on this design, of course I did not end up using half of the color correcting stickers on this relatively small color correcting sticker sheet. So stickers 1 and 2 are of course going to be the orange stickers for the face mask. The face mask is color separated in orange off the runner, but the stickers just add this small metallic strip on each half of the face mask, as you can see there. So yeah, up to you whether or not you want to put these on. The seam that these stickers leave by not being a perfect fit, you can see there's a bit of a nasty seam gap in the middle of these two face mask parts. That is a little bit unsightly, so if that bothers you, I would recommend you just paint in these small strips yourself using a metallic orange. The other two stickers would go on the linear rifle here. They are supposed to go on these parts here, but they're wraparound stickers that would probably not look the greatest on that detail, so I just painted in myself using Dispay's Mecha White paint marker. And the only detail on this kit that is not color accurate that you will need to paint in yourself is going to be this middle strip on the linear rifle. There is no promo material showing the GN flag using the linear rifle, so I had to use the high-grade 00 Over Flag's linear rifle as a model. And comparing it to that, this is the only part that was not color accurate out of the box. This strip in the middle needs to be painted in white. Again, I used Dispay's Mecha White paint marker for that. So apart from that, this kit is entirely color accurate, which you would expect given this kit's relatively simple color scheme. And one other part that I did get wrong in the unboxing, just because of the lighting, it was hard to tell the exact colors of the runners without them being directly next to each other. Runners A and B are not actually the same color. A is in a very dark navy blue, and B is in basically black. It's in, I think, like cobalt blue and black, and the other one's in like midnight blue or something like that. But yeah, you can tell there's a very subtle kind of contrast with some of the black parts and some of the navy blue parts. But again, it is quite subtle, and it's hard to see if you're not specifically paying attention and looking for it. This kit just kind of looks black and white. But getting into my opinions on this design, I do really like the look of the Union flag. It very much contrasts a lot with the Celestial Being Gundams in particular, where those designs very much trended towards being a little bit more organic, looking very more human-like. I feel like the non-GN mobile suits were deliberately designed to look as inhuman as possible, and specifically in the flag here, it pretty much retains just the vaguest shape of being humanoid, but very much appears inhuman. It is extremely inorganic and mechanical. You can see in the very angular geometry all over this kit. This is a very sharp-looking kit, and with the very thin kind of arms and legs, it helps it look very kind of alien and mechanical, very much, again, in contrast to the human-like designs for the Celestial Being Gundams. And you can especially see it when the United Nations ends up getting the Jinx. After the schematics for the GN Drive Tower leaked to them, that design looks very much more organic. It has a lot more curvature to it compared to the designs that the three main power blocks were using beforehand. So yeah, I do really like the flag in sharp contrast to the other designs from the Anno Domini era, and I do really like the design concept of the GN flag in particular, but I don't know how much of that is the, like, again, the design concept carrying it more so than the visual design language, because I do love the idea of this kind of jury-rigged suit where Graham Aker really wanted to use a flag to beat the Exia, so he told his engineer friend to just bolt a GN Drive Tau to it, and I do love that this thing very much feels slapped together, and they need to do all of this stuff, slapping the GN Drive Tau to it, connecting a wire directly from it to a beam saber to replicate Celestial Being's most basic armament, the GN beam saber. So that is a very interesting thing to me, that they need to do all of that just to use the most kind of bare bones of basic armament Celestial Being has, which is kind of interesting. And I do really like that this kit's big, powerful weapon is just a GN beam saber, not a powerful explosive ordnance, not a giant melee weapon, not a big beam weapon. It is just the basic beam saber the Celestial Being has access to. So that's very cool from a kind of design aspect for me, and part of why I like this design so much. One of the parts of this design I am not a big fan of is, of course, going to be in the kind of signature face mask that this kit has. I do really like that it has it, and it can open up to reveal the sensors behind it, but if you've seen any videos on this channel, if you know my opinions, you know I'm very much a sucker for visors, so I very much would have preferred that to be a translucent orange visor or a sensor mask, similar to what the Estrella Type F has. But yeah, apart from that, I do really like the GN Flag here. I do love all of the angularity to it. I love how distinct and different it looks from the Celestial Being Gundams. So yeah, very interesting, and I do like the kind of splash of color that the blue wire has connecting to the GN beam saber there. So for a quick size comparison, here is the high-grade GN Flag next to a standard-sized high-grade, made the high-grade Blue Destiny Unit 1. So as you can see, the GN Flag is going to stand about in line with your typical high-grade, which they did tweak the proportions a little bit because the GN Flag in Universe is only supposed to be, I think, 17.8 meters tall, so it is supposed to be slightly shorter than your typical high-grade, but here, as you can see, it is about the same height, if not slightly taller. So yeah, this will take up about the same amount of space as your average high-grade on the shelf. So for your accessories, here's the high-grade GN Flag with everything it comes with. As per usual, we'll be starting with our hand options, and you will be getting the 2 standard holding hands used on the kit right now for use with all of this kit's weapons, the linear rifle, the 2 plasma cutters stored in the arms, and the GN beam saber stored on the underside of the left shoulder. In addition, you will be getting this open expressive hand only for the right side. One part that I missed in the unboxing section, I probably threw up a correction on screen, is that I forgot that Graham Acre is left-handed. So yeah, of course, all of his MIG weapons will be used in the left hand, and of course his offhand is his right hand, which is why the open expressive hand is for the right side. For your melee options, for your weaker, more basic melee option, you will of course get 2 plasma cutters stored on the inside of each of the forearms. So this cap part will flip open. It is kind of hard to get to. You do need to kind of bend the wrist to get access to the edge of the cap there, but of course this top of the forearm will swing open. The plasma cutter is stored on the underside of it, if I can get it out here. And yeah, the plasma cutter is fairly basic and would be just kind of a normal beam saber in most other kits. If you're using the plasma cutter, you will of course be using the blue beam saber effect part here, just to show that it is using the plasma cutters here. It does look quite nice in this soft translucent cyan color, so you'll be seeing that in the posing section. Of course, you get 2, 1 in each arm. And of course, for the kit's main weapon, you will of course get the GN beam saber stored here on the underside of the left shoulder when not in use. There is a wire here that connects it into the left shoulder. The GN drive Tau here will swing up and lock into the shoulder when you want to use the beam saber, and you do get 1 wire in this kit. It tells you to cut it into 2, 1 8-centimeter section here for when the beam saber is stored, and 1 much longer, about 15-centimeter segment here for when it is active. So just replace the wire so that the GN Flag here can swing the beam saber around and have a longer wire to work with. And as you can see, the GN beam saber is going to be significantly larger than the plasma cutter, so we'll see if it can accommodate a 2-handed grip in any kind of posing, but I do suspect you will need to do something very similar to what I was talking about with the SNAA Tristan, where you wield it with one hand and kind of a mime that is about to grip the sword with its offhand as well, using the open expressive hand option part to help make it look a little bit more dynamic without actually needing to articulate it, holding it with both hands. And of course, for use with the GN beam saber, you will get these 2 clear red beam saber effect parts here in a much darker color than you would normally see in a beam saber like this. Normally they're in clear pink. Here it is in a very distinct red. Well, to help convey that it is the GN drive Tau which is powering this, the GN particles released from that are red. So yeah, it makes sense that the beam generated by the beam saber would be red as well. And of course you get 2 beam saber effect parts for that, but you only have the 1 GN beam saber, so you're only going to be using 1 beam saber effect part. And then of course you will get this kit's only ranged option in the linear rifle, which I don't think it used in the show, but it does come with it here in this kit. The handle here is not articulatable. The other 2 handles here can flip out. You can grip the linear rifle either with the main handle back here or with either of the side handles here on the sides of the weapon. So yeah, the linear rifle does look kind of interesting. I always like the kind of sword-like shape it has with it, but I do feel it was very much intended to look more at home in the Flag's transformed mode, not really in the mobile suit mode, but you'll be seeing this in the posing section. So yeah, a fairly complete accessory spread for the GN Flag here. I do wish it would include some more hand options, but again, that's a luxury that is not entirely expected for a more basic high grade like this. So getting into articulation now, before I get into articulation proper, I will throw up a couple images on screen now. The joints of this kit are capable of partially replicating the transformation transformation into mobile armor mode for the flag, but this kit does not, of course, have all of the parts to do so. Some of the transformation gimmicks that I see that were built into the frame are not usable in this kit. For example, the head cannot sink into the torso. It is blocked by the collar piece the head attaches to. The forearm shape and the caps in the sides of the legs are also preventing the forearms from either locking into the sides of the legs or from fully kind of rotating backwards to articulate its full transformation into mobile armor mode. And of course, the giant wing backpack that this needs to actually get the wings that it needs for mobile armor mode is not included here because, well, it had to be removed and replaced with the GN drive over here. So yeah, while the transformation mechanism is partially replicated in this kit, and I do believe it will be fully present in any future flags that use this kit as a base, it is not fully present here. So getting to articulation now, starting as per usual with the head. For an upward look, you get basically nothing. For a downward look, again, you get basically nothing. Again, let me know in the comments if I'm a little bit off here, but I'm not sure if I did something wrong in construction, but yeah, the articulation in the head because of this collar piece is fairly minimal. You do get some rotation in the head here. It will want to pop out of the socket though, so at most you will get about 90 degrees to either side before it will fully pop itself out of the socket. In addition, the face mask, like I mentioned earlier, can open up. It is a little bit hard to articulate, but the face mask can open up like so, revealing this nice metallic injection silver detail on the inside with the 3 sensors. So that is a cool thing that can be replicated, although I'm not exactly sure what purpose it serves, because I do believe the sensor can just be used normally with the face mask over it, so I don't see a reason to expose it like this, but it is a cool detail that was included in this kit. In the shoulders then, for a shoulder swing, you do get about 45 degrees, but the shoulder can pop out like so to further enhance the shoulder swing to almost 90 degrees forward. And you also get about 75 degrees backwards. This is mostly so the GN drive can swing up and attach into the shoulder. It cannot do so unless you swing the shoulder backwards. You do get full 360 rotation in the arm here. Just be careful with the cable here that will collide with all of the geometric details all over this kit. You do get full rotation in the upper bicep. Again, it's kind of hard to do on the left side because of the GN saber mounted here under the shoulder. A single bend in the elbow will give you about a 135 degree bend. Of course, the forearm can't open up like you saw in the accessories section because that's where the plasma cutter is stored. The wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things, in addition to a hinge that will allow for a 90 degree bend, either forwards or backwards, for use in like thrusting poses and things like that. In the torso then, there are 2 points of articulation, one going from the torso down into the waist and one from the upper part of the torso into this middle section. I do believe this is mostly going to be for the transformation mechanism, so the torso can give the illusion of sinking down into itself when it's transformed into mobile armor mode, but for the GN flag here, it does facilitate an extremely nice forward ab crunch and a very nice backwards ab crunch, nearly 90 degrees, but you do need to swing the GN drive tau out of the way to facilitate that. This kit does have some fairly nice side to side tilt, although it's a little bit difficult to articulate. And of course, the kit can 360 about the ball joint. Again, just be careful with all of the protrusions all over this kit that nothing ends up colliding or breaking. For the GN drive tau, of course, it is on a hinge that can swing back like so, and this is mostly used when it rotates up and you articulate the shoulder backwards a little bit. The GN drive tau will just kind of lock into this part here, and then you can show that the beam saber is being directly powered by the GN drive tau. I am a little bit worried for articulation and how natural this looks, because as you can see, the shoulder's kind of locked permanently in the slight back position to accommodate the GN drive tau, so I don't know how natural you can actually get melee poses with the GN beam saber while it's attached to the reactor like this, but we'll see that in the posing section. In the waist then, there's pretty much no skirt armor to speak of, apart from these 2 flaps on the back, which can move up and down like so. The legs do each have a individual hip swing mechanism. I do believe this is partially for the transformation, but yeah, you can see it swing forward and backwards like so. And as you can see, the connection from the leg into the hip is a ball joint, which will do ball joint things. For your front kicks, you will only get about 45 degrees forward. For side kicks, you will get just over 90 degrees. You will need to articulate this like fin on the side of the leg out of the way for that. And for back kicks, you will get just about 90 degrees. But do be careful because as you can see here, the wire kind of detached from the GN beam saber over here. Oh, before I forget, the shoulder armor can move independently of the arm and rotate up independently to facilitate about a 135 degree side raise. I almost forgot that part. A double joint in the knee will give you a nearly 180 degree bend with a very nice kind of inner piston molded detail here with some power cabling molded into the lower part of the knee joint. These stabilizer slash fin things can rotate on the side of the leg about a peg. There is no ankle armor to speak of. These kind of flaps here on the backs of the heels can rotate down. Of course, that's also, I believe, mostly for the transformation to mobile armor mode. And these front fin parts can move a little bit, and there is going to be some heel-toe separation in the foot here. For overall toe raises, you do get a very nice nearly 90-degree toe raise. For overall toe dips, you get a moderate toe dip, and most of the dip is going to be in the heel-toe separation there. You get almost 90 degrees to either side, and for rotation, you can of course 360 it about a ball joint. So articulation in the GN Flag is rather impressive, especially in the torso and in the feet, where it does offer more articulation than expected. The one limiting factor that I am a little bit worried about is of course going to be the left shoulder locked in place with the GN Drive Tau here in the back of the shoulder, because I am worried that will end up limiting your melee posing options if you want to have the GN Drive Tau locked into the shoulder over here. But we'll see that in some poses. And before I forget, the .2 mountain action base is going to be on the back here. So if you just need to remove the cap for the GN Drive Tau arm here, which is kind of hard to get off. But once it's off, you do reveal a point to mount a 3mm peg for an action base. So yeah, let's see this kit in some poses. Alright, so getting the GN Flag into a spin, starting with the usual running and gunning pose, or well, something close to it, because I did have to cheat a little bit. Because of the very small surface area of the feet, this kit really did struggle to balance on one leg on its own. It could, but it was a giant pain to do, and I couldn't do it on my spinning base here because of the glass top just providing less friction, and it did slip around a lot more. I could get to balance on one foot on my project mat, but it was also very kind of tenuous at best in terms of its balance, and I think a gentle breeze would have knocked it over. But here it is in a running pose with it being supported by an action base 7 connecting into the point on the back. So this demonstrates a few things. One, this kit does look pretty dynamic in these very mobile poses. Because of the very thin angular proportions of this kit, it does look really great in motion, although in my opinion it does look a lot better in motion in the air. This kind of motion on the ground is fine. It does look plenty dynamic. The open expressive hand on the right side is doing a lot to help convey the motion of running, and this kit does look very good with the linear gun. Even though the GN Flag in universe wasn't supposed to use the linear gun, I think it was entirely a melee loadout that it had, but with the linear gun, I think especially because it does just kind of look like a sword, it does look pretty good here with the GN Flag. Although, in my opinion, if you're getting this kit, you're probably going to want to display it with the GN Beam Saber. With its larger size and connected via the wire, it just does look a lot more distinct than the linear rifle does. So yeah, if this kit does end up being used as a base for a line of revived flag kits or new flags, then I would say use the linear rifle. If you're getting specifically the GN Flag, I would say stick to one of its other melee options. So of course, to cover all my bases, here is the GN Flag in a, well, the closest I could get to an actual kneeling pose, post slash with the two plasma cutters, with one of them in a reverse grip, and this demonstrates a few things. One, this kit really cannot hit a kneeling pose at all, because of the proportions where the lower leg is so much longer than the upper leg, and the hip drop not necessarily being the most conducive to actually dropping the leg all that far. The GN Flag cannot get the back leg actually balanced on the ground with the knee, and as you're seeing, it does have to kind of roll the ankle to get it balanced at all, so this doesn't really look the greatest. Again, because of the proportions of this kit, because of how thin the limbs are, because of the angular nature of a lot of the geometry sticking off of it, you really want this kit either in the air or in motion in general. In this kind of static pose on the ground post slash, it really isn't making the best use of what this kit is capable of, and I really wouldn't want to use the plasma cutters with this kit. If you want to dual wield the GN Beam Saber and a plasma cutter, that might be an interesting option, but just the two plasma cutters really isn't playing to the unique strengths of the GN Flag here. Again, you really want it to be using the GN Beam Saber. So yeah, while I appreciate the plasma cutters were included for completion's sake, I like that they can be stored in the forearms very kind of diegetically in conjunction with this design. In general, really don't like a pose like this for the GN Flag. So getting the kit into the air, here it is kind of leaping, charging forward, attacking with the GN Beam Saber, and this does demonstrate a few things. One, this kit really does look great in the air. Poses like this help it look really dynamic, make the most out of its geometry and things like that. Two, my concerns were a little bit founded in terms of the articulation with the GN Beam Saber being limited once you swing the GN Drive Tau to lock into the left shoulder, because the shoulder has to swing back and be held in that swung back position in order for the drive to lock in place. Your arm articulation is severely limited. So while poses like this where you're attacking on the same side as the left arm does look pretty okay, poses where you want to mime that the GN Beam Saber is being held two-handed are very limited because of this. While the shoulder swing is quite good and the right arm can kind of almost get into position, it is not quite able to get there just because of how far back the left shoulder is being locked in place. You can get around this if you want to switch the GN Beam Saber to being wielded by the right hand instead of the left. That does allow for a lot more wider range of articulation. However, that does kind of conflict with the lore, I guess, a bit, because of Graham Acre being left-handed, and with the open expressive hand very much clearly intending for the weapon to be used primarily with the left hand. That may be a bit awkward depending on how highly you value kind of lore accuracy in your posing. But this is a very good pose for the GN Flag here. The wire adds a lot of kind of dynamicism to this pose. The bending of the wrist allows it to convey either a thrusting attack or a post-slash attack very well, and the mounting point onto the back of the kit for the action base instead of the bottom does allow for a lot more easy kind of like sideways or lateral tilting that again adds a lot more to the dynamicism of poses like this. So yeah, this is an excellent pose for the GN Flag and how I have it posed on my shelf right now. So here's the kit in the air, kind of dual wielding the plasma cutter and the linear rifle in this kind of like, I guess, aura farming pose if you look at it at a certain angle, but the visor split open to reveal the sensors underneath. So I'm gonna have this pose up spinning while I get into the conclusion, just because I think these kind of like, I guess, keyframe poses where it's in this kind of dynamic pose, but not really necessarily mid-action, is interesting, but not really the best use of the GN Flag. Again, a pose like the previous one where it is actively like mid-attack with the GN Beam Saber is where this kit is going to shine the most. So in conclusion, the high-grade GN Flag is a very unexpected release that completely retools the flag design with all new molding, making full use of the 18 years of tech advancements that Bandai has made to their high-grade lines since the high-grade 00 line originally released, and it really does show. With a pleasant build, nearly complete color accuracy, a full accessory spread, and excellent articulation, this kit really does feel like the high-grade 00 line brought into the modern era. In terms of the build, it is very pleasant, although this kit is still a high-grade customized grunt suit at the end of the day. It is relatively simple and quick. You can bang this out in an afternoon fairly quickly. There are a couple of fit issues in the build, however, with the visor in the head in particular not quite fitting right, and as you're kind of nestling into the head, it does tend to wedge the visors out and you have to reassemble that whole thing, and it is a bit annoying. And two, the kind of tabs in the upper collar where the fins attach into are very tight. You need to be very careful as you're putting them in, otherwise you will snap them like I did to one of the tabs. I did end up snapping one of them off. I had to plastic cement it back into place. It's fine now, but it is something you will need to pay attention to. But the build is very nice and makes full use of the tech advancements Bandai has made over these last 18 years or so. In particular, most of the pegs in this kit have a kind of rotation lock, where there's a tab that fits in one way, you twist the part 180 degrees, and it is locked in place, which helps this kit feel very solid despite the thinness of its limbs, making it look a little bit more fragile than it actually is. The one problem I will point out with that is that lock also applies to the white piece that connects the wire into the GN Beam Saber. So if you don't remember that that's there, like I did, and just try to pull out the adapter when you're swapping out the active and inactive adapters for the cable going into the GN Drive Tau, then you may end up snapping the peg off. That happened to one of my adapters. That's definitely something you will need to pay attention to if you're just reposing this kit with the GN Beam Saber. In terms of aesthetics then, this is going to be the main draw of this kit, unless you just really wanted a refresh of the high-grade flag, but this kit is nearly entirely color accurate. The only color correcting stickers you will need are 2 for the visor, which are only for the metallic strip in the middle of the visor. The visors are color accurate and color separated out of the box in that nice orange, and 2 white parts for the linear rifle, but those parts are very kind of geometrically distinct and easy to paint in yourself. The only detail you will need to paint in is going to be on the center of the linear rifle in white, but again, because that's not a weapon the GN Flag canonically used in universe, it isn't really that big of a deal if you don't paint it in and just don't use the linear rifle in general. The actual base mobile suit itself is entirely color accurate, which you would probably expect given its relatively simple color scheme, but it is actually using a 2-tone thing with a black and a very dark navy blue, creating a very subtle contrast that, personally, I don't think I'm colorblind, but I really didn't notice unless I was looking very closely specifically for it. In my opinion, it's kind of hard to tell. I wish they made the colors just a tiny bit more distinct if they wanted to have that 2-tone contrast, but you can let me know what you think in the comments below. I genuinely did not notice it until later when I looked at the color guide and realized there are 2 different like kind of shades of blue listed here. But yeah, aesthetically, the GN Flag is very interesting. I went over it more in depth in the aesthetics section, but it is very inhuman, very inorganic in a very unique way, having incredibly thin proportions with all of this angularity sticking out from it to contrast with the very human-like Gundams of Celestial Being. And I do really like the concept of it being a kind of jerry-rigged together model with a GN Drive Tau ripped out of a Jinx and just bolted onto this without much consideration for how exactly it would be used, to the point where they had to have a cable going into the most basic of basic weapons for Celestial Being, the GN Beam Saber, in order to have it even be usable by the GN Flag as it's a big weapon to kind of even the playing field when it's dueling the X dyslexia. So yeah, I really love the design concept of this unit. I like how it looks. Aesthetically, this kit really does represent the GN Flag perfectly in the modern high-grade line. In terms of accessories, this kit comes with essentially everything you would expect it to. It comes with 2 plasma cutters stored inside the forearms. It comes with the linear rifle, which again, the GN Flag didn't use in Universe, but it is a nice to have, and it being on a generic Union Flag runner does potentially demonstrate the intention of Bandai in the future to have a line of new flags or a line of high-grade 00 Revive flags, which would be very interesting. It of course also comes with the GN Beam Saber, which connects to the GN Drive Tau on the left shoulder with one of 2 wires. You get 1 wire, you cut it into a short part for when it's stored and a long part for when it is active. And you will of course get 2 standard high-grade holding hands as well as an open expressive hand only on the right side because its pilot Graham Acre is left-handed. So yeah, this kit comes with essentially everything you would expect it to. Really the only things I would want out of this kit are maybe duplicate hand option parts, so you have an open expressive hand for the left side as well, or if this kit really wanted to go above and beyond, and maybe it might for a future like accessory pack or something, if it came with the parts to enable the GN Flag to transform or to convert to like an over flag or something, that would be a really cool and interesting option for this kit in terms of accessory spread, but it is definitely not needed to have a complete accessory spread like what is included in the box. In terms of articulation, as you might expect from a entirely melee focused mobile suit, the GN Flag here does perform very admirably in terms of posing. It has an excellent range of articulation across the board, with standout points being of course going to be in the feet and in the torso, with a ton of articulation there allowing for pretty much any kind of melee pose you would want. Really the only disappointing parts are going to be in the head, with limited articulation because of the rather large collar piece the head has to attach into, although I'm not entirely sure if that's an issue on my end with how I built this kit, with the peg being relatively deep in the body to the point where it's kind of hard to connect the head into, or if it's just a part of this design. The other part that's a little bit disappointing is going to be when you lock the GN Drive Tau into the left shoulder, because the shoulder has to swing back for it to lock into place. It really does limit your articulation with the left arm if you want to attack the opposite side with the GN Beam Saber. This can be alleviated by wielding the GN Beam Saber in the right hand instead of the left, but that does contradict with lore a bit, I believe. It isn't the biggest deal in the world because you can get plenty of great posing out of this kit if you just have it attack its left side with the GN Beam Saber. So would I recommend this kit? Honestly, absolutely. If you see it get reprinted, if you have to buy it from a reseller, and you have p-bandai available in your region, I would say absolutely do not do that and hold off on it, because if you're going to have to get this kit for like $80, $90, definitely not worth it. If this kit gets reprinted for like upper $20, maybe $30, depending on price hikes, then I would say go for it. This is an incredibly pleasant build, and it's great to see Bandai kind of reviving the older 00 line with a design like this. I was a little bit concerned that this was going to be something like the HG00 Custom, where it was very much reusing old molding and old tech and very much felt like an old kit, but this does feel like a modern kit that did truly come out in 2025. This is a great modern take on a design like the Flag, and especially if you haven't built many high-grade 00 kits, this is an incredibly unique addition to your collection. You can definitely get a lot of mileage out of it, especially posing it with any of the many 1/144 scale sets in a suits we've gotten over the years. If you've gotten the real great Exia or Exia Avalanche Dash or something like that, you can definitely make a very interesting display posing this kit dueling that. So yeah, this is a great kit. I'm very surprised it came out. I'm very glad it did. It is a fantastic kind of revival of the high-grade Flag, and I really hope that Bandai does make a bunch more flags using this as the base. It is a fantastic addition to your collection. So that was my review of the high-grade 00 GN Flag. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. I was very pleasantly surprised with this kit, and I hope if any of you got it, you were too. If you like reviews like these, make sure to set the notification bell so you know future uploads. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with my review of the high-grade Witcher Mercury Gundam Nyan. I'll see you then.